Everything you see behind me and on this side, with the exception of the base, has some modification or is new for 2018. I'd like to start off, I'll tell you just a little bit. Again, my name is Michael Lilly. I've covered all of Canada for about 8 years now for Taylor Guitars. I started off as a product specialist. I was on the road for them just doing product demo. You've probably seen Kenny here or Wayne Johnson, some of the guys that travel with us. That was my job for a year with Taylor. I was living in Austin at the time, and they offered me a full-time sales job, so I moved to San Diego. And we didn't do one here at Tom Lee last year, but we did a new for 2017 when we launched the Academy series and the bass last year and a couple of other things. This year we have a really big story. This gentleman asked me how NAMM was. NAMM is our big trade show that we do every year in January. Attracts probably close to 150,000 people from all over the world, all the vendors, all the buyers, all the retailers. And it's essentially 4 days of noise and late nights and dinners and live bands and everybody showing their new thing. And we actually won the Best in Show for the V-Class bracing. I'm going to kind of start off and just go over a couple of other little things here and then get to telling the story of the V-Class, how it came to be, what it actually means, how we've learned to best describe it, and my own personal experience with it a little bit. And again, it's very informal, so if you have a question along the way, please feel free to just throw up your hand. I'm going to start with, we did a little modification to our Koa series this year. This is a K22 CE 12 fret. So does everybody know our body shapes, our 5 body shapes from Taylor? We go over that every road show, and might be a good place to start. Our best-selling shape is the Grand Auditorium. Then we have the Grand Concert, which is the smaller body shape, has a shorter scale length, 24 7/8 inch from the saddle to the nut. This is actually a 12 fret version, meaning that the bridge has been slid down 2 frets into the lower bout of the guitar, sliding the whole presentation down 2 frets, bringing it in a little closer to your body, where the body and the neck are joined right at the 12th fret. On a Grand Concert 14 fret, it would still be the same scale length, but everything would be slid up 2 frets. The other 3 body shapes, the Grand Symphony, which is a little bit bigger than the Grand Auditorium, that ends in the number 6. A Dreadnought, which is the very traditional shape, more of the square body shape we've all seen, that ends in the number 0. And then our last body shape is the large, which replaced the jumbo a few years ago, called the Grand Orchestra. And that ends in the number 8. Tonight we're going to focus a little bit more on the new things for 2018. But if you have any general questions about the company or about our guitars, or of course V-Class, please feel free to just ask away. So we'll start with this one. I'm going to play and just play a little bit through a microphone. I'm going to plug a couple of these in. This is Koa, of course. Koa comes from the Big Island in Hawaii. Our K series has Koa back and sides and a top. The biggest change this year to the Koa series is the fingerboard inlay. We'll show the builder's edition of the V-Class here in a little bit. It has the same design, but a different material, a power shell. We've also brought back maple binding on the Koa series. You can see this one has a really extraordinary top, almost like a kind of a checkerboard square on the outside of the lower bout there. One of the things that's really nice about 12 fret is that they're really easy to play. Everything, like I said, is brought in a little closer to your body. Those first position chords are brought in, tucked in a little more, like an F chord. You can see how it's all tucked right in. I know I'm a big guy, I'm about 6'6", but I still really like the small body guitars. And with the small body guitar, they respond a lot better to a lighter touch because it's a smaller surface area to get to vibrate and get to move. The bigger the body shape, the more energy it takes with the right hand to actually get it to come to full volume. But if you're a light touch player, really nice, easy, kind of a light touch. Now, it doesn't mean you can't pick up a flat pick and get some volume out of it or a strum part. Dig in a little bit, you're just never going to get that same volume out of a jumbo or a grand symphony or maybe even a dreadnought, the bigger, larger body shapes. But again, a great finger picking guitar, very versatile for a light touch player. So that's our K22 CE 12 fret. Another model that came in right near the end of last year, so we're kind of considering it anew for 2018. 2 years ago at NAMM, it was the year of the 12 fret and the 12 string, and Andy Powers decided to combine those two things and actually make a 12 string where the body joins at the 12th fret. Which 12 string, we generally think of a really big guitar. It's something you lean into, got a lot of overtones, a lot of octave strings. So Andy said, well, what if we make a smaller body? We make it easier to play. We're going to join the body and the neck at the 12th fret, like I showed you on that K22. And of course, it's going to be a 12 string. Now, if you've never played a 12 string, and if you've tried, they're tricky to tune. A lot of people make a joke like, well, you spend half your time tuning it and the other half the time playing it out of tune. That's not so true with Taylor. We have a double compensated saddle. What that does is that actually lifts the height of the strings to be even on the attack side. So this is an octave string, an octave E, and then the fundamental E. So the octave E is going to be a much thinner string. And traditionally, it sits much lower, and it gets a little hard to kind of attack them. You might miss one. So we've actually compensated the saddle to bring the height of the two strings up at the same height. And then when I say double compensated, it's also compensated for the intonation of the 12 string. Now, again, a 12 string is one of those guitars that people will play for a couple of hours, and it can be really kind of taxing on your hand. It's hard to get the harder shapes, but with the 12th fret, it makes it a lot easier. I think I lost my mic there. You can just leave that on. Oh, that's right, yeah. Well, that's right, I'll play it here, and I'll plug in the nylon. Be able to go that far up the neck with confidence. You hear the tuning? So this is a 362 CE 12 string, 12 fret. It's in our 300 series. The back and sides are Tasmanian blackwood. The top is mahogany. We started off with it in a 500 series, a 562 and a 552, which were both mahogany back and sides, different top options. We did a limited run of a 700 series, which is rosewood, right there. And this last year we decided to make one that was so popular to put one in a 300 series price point for players. A lot of times when players are looking for a 12 string, you know, it's a third or fourth guitar, different tone flavor. So to put one kind of like a baritone, when somebody adds a baritone to their quiver, they're looking for something different, kind of a different tonal aspect. So we brought this in the 300 series. Available in this version, which is again Tasmanian blackwood, mahogany top, or it's available in the 352, which is Tasmanian blackwood and a Sitka spruce top. Sapele and a Sitka spruce top. The next guitar, it was one that was actually released at the beginning of 2017, but we got so overwhelmed with building the bass and building a few other things that we pulled the nylon string version of the Academy off the menu for the majority of 2017, and we brought it back. So this is an Academy 12E nylon. So the Academy series is sort of an entry level that we build in our Tecate plant, which is about an hour and a half south of San Diego in Tecate, Mexico. you can see that this features an armrest, and the way we're able to do a beveled armrest at this price point is that this guitar has no binding on it. So they can do this and machine it, not have to do it by hand like we do on the 900s and the presentations. So it's a really comfort feature right here. If you've ever finished playing and you've got those lines across your arm right here, you know, it's just it's kind of like cruise control. Until you experience it, you go, oh, it's kind of hard to go back now. So I'm going to plug this one in. There's two versions. Comes with pickup or without. This one has a pickup, so we'll. So it's a good example of different tones, different guitars, different strings, different tunings. To me, they all evoke different feelings, and they make you want to play things that you might not normally play. So this is the Academy series. It's also available. There's 6 total models, two different shapes. This is the 12, the smaller body. There are 4 guitars in this shape, 2 steel string and 2 nylon, with pickup or without pickup, and then there's 2 that steel string in the 10 shape, which is the a little bit carved down version of the Dreadnought. That's an Academy 10 or Academy 10E. This one I'll just show you because we want to kind of get to the V class. This is the biggest change. This is a 414 CE R, R meaning rosewood. We do our 400 series in Ovencall and in rosewood. Rosewood became a very interesting tone wood at the beginning of 2017. Difficult to export, and we had attorneys and counsel at the meeting in Africa when this was all being discussed. We got permits to be able to export rosewood from our U.S. plant pretty much by February, so we tightened it up really quickly. And we continue to offer the 400 series in rosewood. The only modification this year is a new inlay, a Renaissance inlay on the 400 series in rosewood. The Ovencall still has the dot inlay, so it's a cosmetic difference this year on the 400s. Okay, let's switch gears. So we're all interested in the V class. We've been reading about it, and I'm just going to give you a little 2 or 3 minute kind of a presentation on how it came to be, how Andy came to discover this method of bracing guitars. So X-brace has a lot of history. When a top is braced with an X-brace going across the top, we call the top of a guitar a soundboard. It's been around for over 160 years, and it's been modified, it's been tweaked, it's been adjusted, but it's still pretty much been an X-brace pattern on a flat top acoustic guitar. Andy Powers came to Taylor just over 7.5, 8 years ago, as Bob continued to put more and more effort into our ebony mill in Cameroon, Africa, and spending a lot of time with the conservation of different tone woods and doing projects now in Hawaii for Koa, and of course, as I mentioned, Cameroon for ebony. He also realized he was turning 60 years old, and he didn't know, he wants the future of Taylor guitars and really the guitar building industry to be solid, which is why he's doing all this work with different tone woods and replanting. And so he brought on, he had a wish list and if you've been following Andy Powers in the wood and steel, you know that the wish list was to have a young luthier who has 20 years of building experience, is from the San Diego area, never worked for a major guitar manufacturer. All these sound like a lot of things that couldn't exist on the same page, especially when you're looking for a guy who's in his 30s with 20 years of building experience. And Andy Powers came on board, and Bob knew him when he was a teenager, or knew of him. Andy was building one-off instruments, everything from ukuleles to mandolins to arch tops to electric guitars, acoustic guitars. Andy's also a world-class studio and performance player, really great multi-instrumentalist musician. So he came on board, and the first thing he did was he invented the grand orchestra body shape, which replaced the jumbo. He redesigned the 800 series, which was our biggest selling series. And a lot of these involved different hide glues, different bracing patterns, but they were all tweaks on the existing X-brace pattern that, again, has, you know, a century and a half of history. Andy likes to say he feels like he squeezed the last bit of tone out of the X-brace. And about 4 or 5 years ago, he was surfing. Andy's also an avid surfer. I know there's not much the guy doesn't do. And he was watching the water break over a jetty, and the way that it would hit the jetty and it would dissipate off to the sides of the jetty. It was all chaotic as it hit. And as soon as it hit the jetty, it would kind of even out on either side. And he started thinking about the top of a guitar. And when you think about, we think about volume and sustain. Volume comes from flexibility. So I'll use the analogy of a banjo head. A banjo head is a drum head, very flexible, a lot of flex in that. When you hit a note, it's very loud, but there's very little sustain. It's like big loud noise, and then the decay is very quick. It doesn't last a long time. Whereas if you have for sustain, you think of maybe a Les Paul, a solid piece of a block of wood with pickups built into portholes. You plug that thing in and you hit a note, and it's just going to last forever because it's resonating inside of a solid piece of wood. Now, when you're building a soundboard or an X-brace guitar, when you're taking away volume or adding sustain, you're taking away volume. It works the opposite direction. When you're adding volume, you have to take away sustain because of the way that the X-brace was shaped. So what Andy's done with a V-Class, he's put a center V brace system that gives it the support down the middle, but allows the two sides to function without one taking from the other. And it's more like a seesaw or a teeter-totter, where it's actually moving in a much more uniform way. An analogy we like to use, when you're at a concert and you're going to hear your favorite band or songwriter, or you're at a play, anywhere where it's time for the audience to applaud. I'm not just asking for applause for me. Let's all applaud. Right? All right, so that's kind of chaotic, right? It kind of started slow, then got louder, and there's no rhythm to it. Some people are like this, some people are like this. So there's no real order to it. Now, if we're listening to a guy play guitar and the groove is here, and we're going to clap on the 1 and the 2 and the 4. Here we go, and do this with it. Just clap that for a second. That's the same noise, right? But it's way more musical, way more pleasing to the ears than that sort of sporadic. And that's really what Andy has done. The chaos of the vibration of the guitar was kind of noise, and he's created order to the volume and the sustain. And along the way, the third really big benefit of this, and the one that I think personally blows me away the most, is the harmony of the in-tuneness of the guitar, the intonation. And this is all done by the bracing. So how many have experienced playing, picking up one of your favorite guitars? And I own guitars from many brands, and this is in no way, one of the things that we want to really relay to you when we're talking about V-Class is we didn't fix a problem that was broken. Nobody was like, God, if guitars could just be in tune. Because we all own multiple guitars, and we've played X-brace guitars for centuries. But I own, again, many guitars, some Taylors, other brands, and none of them do what these V-brace guitars do. And I'll demonstrate what I'm talking about in a minute. But how many have picked up a guitar, you get it in tune with the tuner, and that E chord, okay, it all looks perfect, it sounds great. So in the key of E, you're probably going to have an A chord, and you're probably going to have a B chord. All rock, country, blues, there's generally 3 or 4 chords in different keys. You get to that 4 chord maybe, or the 5 chord, the B chord, it might sound a little bit out of tune. So you go back to that first chord and you check it with the tuner, it's still in tune. You might have to compensate one string just slightly to make that 5 chord in tune. And then when you start going up the neck past the 5th fret, it exacerbates a little bit more, where you might have to make a compensation. Maybe you're bending a string a little bit. It's very subtle. It's not like it's, oh my God, it's so far out of tune. Now that can be a problem if your action's that high and you're dealing with a whole other set of issues then. But so we're always doing little things that we're maybe not even aware of as players, and we do it on different guitars. I have guitars at home that I know just sing out in the best keys or in a drop D tuning. So having said that, Let's see, I'll start with this. We have 4 V-Class guitars. So we launched the V-Class bracing in 4 different models. All 4 are grand auditoriums. The plan is to put the V-Class bracing in all of the grand auditoriums before the end of 2018. And in 2019, we're going to roll it into the other body shapes with all of our US-made guitars. So we have the 914 CE, which I'm holding right now. We have the presentation, the PS14 CE. We have the K24 CE, which is our grand auditorium in the KOA series. And then we have a K14 CE Builder's Edition, which I'll show in a moment, that has a few added features that Andy kind of built. It's kind of the director's cut. I don't know if you've had the chance to read it in the Wood and Steel article, but I'll show you that one. And I will tell you that that one was purchased by a gentleman about an hour ago. So I'll show it to you. And he has graciously said, sure, let people play it, just kind of keep an eye on it for me if you would. So, we're all mindful of those, belt buckles and motorcycle chains and rings and things like that. So we'll get to that one in a minute. What's that?
What do you pay for it?
Oh, I have no idea. I don't get into that discussion. Why? What are you willing to pay for? That's done by Dan and his staff over there. So before I even really get into playing this, we're going to first talk about sustain. So we talked about sustain comes from rigidity. So to demonstrate that, I'm just going to play a single note, an E note, on the 3rd string at the 9th fret. You guys were very patient. That's a lot of sustain. And I'm not hitting it with a very hard attack. It's mic'd so everybody can hear in the back, but I'll do it again. This is normally a spot on a guitar too that we don't really call it a dead zone, but it gets a little more challenging as you get up into this area of the guitar. So I'm going to play an E major scale now. These notes really get choked off generally, like, and you go with the next. So listen to the overtone. A lot of sustain. So to demonstrate the in-tuneness, so I'm just going to play a couple of chords up here. I'm going to play an E chord that's got a G sharp right on the high end. Now normally, sometimes when you play 2 notes together, you can hear what's almost called a beating or a warbling. And if you watch a tuner, when you're tuning like to maybe one of the Peterson strobe tuners or something, it's searching for that note. It might be dancing north, dancing left. So this is I'm just going to play a couple of chords. Just listen to the way that they sort of react together. Another good example of this.
Nice.
Do you hear it's almost like a harp-like
So
quality to it.
that is tough.
A G chord. We've all played a G chord. Like when you play a G chord like this, you generally leave that B string open. A lot of times if it's the last chord of a song or you're trying to play Night Moves by Bob Seger or something, you want to kind of cover up that. You'll compensate by putting a D here. Helps feel like it tunes it a little bit. And you also maybe even mute that B note too. But on this guitar, I'm just going to run through a couple of major chords. This is another good good example of this D, and this D. So really what Andy's done is found a way to really kind of allow these notes to have the sustain and have the volume, but at the same time just create this in-tuneness. A lot of time when we talk about intonation of a guitar, people think about compensation. And again, whether you're compensating by slightly tweaking a string, or maybe even like I've played where you go to play this chord, and you might even, you want to bend a note to sharpen it a little bit, or maybe come back down and say, well, it sounds sharp when I get up there. And in this song, I know I'm going to go up there, and I really want that chord to be in tune. So. So the other cool thing I really love is that open strings against fretted strings. That would be a place I'd really be scared to go in terms of having it be in tune. You can just walk down that little E. That's just with a really light touch, so you can hear there's a lot of sustain on those notes. Any comments about V-Class or questions? I'm sure there's some questions. Everybody looks stunned.
It sounds beautiful.
Well, thank you. I agree. And I think a couple of other things to note about V-Class, the way to recognize them, just hanging on the wall of the store, you'll notice that the nut on the guitar is black, and it's a black graphite nut. The other thing that you'll notice immediately is that the tag on the inside of the guitar is different than any other Taylor. It's now signed by Andy Powers with Bob Taylor's name watermark behind it. So this is a pretty big step for Bob to, he's kind of, passing the torch. I mean, he's been doing that for a few years with Andy, but for him to change I'm pretty sure we'll always say Taylor on the headstock. but yeah, it's pretty amazing to see, what Andy has accomplished in 8 years. And this is not something new. I mean, he's been working on them for 4 to 5 years. I got to play a prototype a couple years ago before I really knew what I was even trying. And then as he's developed them, building them one at a time, he'll bring us by and let us play them and check them out. And then we knew that this was going to be the year that they're actually launched. Because I think he had different versions of the V-Class until he settled on the one that you see on the cover of the Wood and Steel. Obviously, we're not trying to hide it from anybody. It's pretty clear what he's done.
That's an aesthetic question. I noticed the 4 that you have there have the different design in the headstock. It's not just like they've all got that kind of leaf design in the headstock.
Right. Well, yeah.
I was wondering if that was an indication of the.
It is not. It is not, because you'll see that. Well, this one doesn't, because it's a 12 fret. But no, it's just going to be by series.
I just looked at those 4 and saw that they all did. So
yeah, that's a good observation. Yeah, and that's because we launched it in 4 of our highest end guitars. It's going to roll out into 4 more coming into probably May, around summer NAMM time, and then 4 more before the end of the year. So we'll cover all the grand auditoriums.
Does that make it hard to get hold of one because there's a limited spot?
Well, they're not limited. It's going to be a standard model. I mean, it's going to be the wave of the future for all of our guitars, V-Class brace. So they're just coming off the line. The one that will be, well, this one is limited in terms of material. We're going to build 100 of these this year, and we're sold out. So this one is one of, we took orders for them at NAMM for a little more than 100, and then got to put the brakes on because they really want to make sure they're using just the top ebony from our ebony mill, and then also the sinker redwood. So this is the presentation, the PS14CE V-Class. Of course, you can see the black graphite nut. This is our blingiest guitar that we make in the presentation series. This year it's going to be in Macassar ebony, in African ebony. back and sides. Sinker redwood, this top, if you've never seen a sinker redwood, it came from the Mendocino River underwater for about 100 years, broke free, and we had a nice supply of it about 3 years ago. We got some more in a couple years ago, and the guys in the laser room, it just wasn't up to Taylor standards, and so we took it off the custom menu. We were able to get enough back to build probably a couple hundred guitars. So 100 of them will be built with V-Class, and then the other 100 will go into other shapes. But in answer to your question, the one that's going to be the toughest to get time-wise, or it's just going to take a little longer, is the one that actually sold tonight. And it's we took a ton of orders for these at NAMM. And we're building 6 or 7 of these a day now for all over the world. I'll show you that one in just a second. But let me play a little on the presentation. So again, 1 of 100. Got that chord right there. Just so the way those notes just work together. Of course, the presentation features the beveled armrest, a lot of power shell inlay, and you can see the fingerboard extension here, so just an incredible piece. But the one that I think am the most excited about, and obviously the gentleman who was here an hour ago was, when every builder's edition that we release, 3 or 4 guitars, every V-Class, one is going to be the builder's edition. Now the builder's edition obviously has V-Class bracing, but it has quite a few other things that Andy considers to be kind of the, it's sort of his builder or director's cut, we call it, because he put all the little details into it that I think that he was getting back to his building one guitar at a time, luthier days. And he just wanted to make a really comfortable guitar, have some features that most people haven't seen. First thing I notice when I pick it up is that all the edges are rounded, like not even just where the bevel and where the armrest is, but it's just got a softer presentation around the corners. This is Koa back and sides, and it's got a torrefied Sitka spruce top. Another thing you'll notice is that there's actually a little bevel in the cutaway here. So if this is an armrest, this must be a pinky rest. Maybe.
There you go.
But the neat thing about this little bevel in the cutaway is this cutaway is designed and built completely differently than any of the other cutaways that we've done. So if you look closely here, you'll see that off of the heel block, there's a little tiny ridge of wood, but it's very uniform.